Hello, everyone. Welcome to the debut episode of Neon Genesis EvanGLORIO, our very creatively named new podcast venture on the Glorio network here.
Our very relevant podcast, our very timely podcast about 1996. Is it 1996?
We could say five. It started in 95.
All right.
Timelier than Legend of the Glorio Heroes.
Hey,
Yes.
well, look. We're nothing if not always ready to capitalize on the hottest and newest trends.
Man, we didn't even get into the first minute and you guys managed to bring up Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
We are pros. And also,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that wasn't me this time.
Yes. But anyway, yes, as we've mentioned, we are here to talk about the iconic 1995 sci-fi mecha classic Neon Genesis Evangelion, which is a series that I'm sure we don't need to introduce to anime fans. It is omnipresent. It's been a phenomena since the day it came out, and honestly, never really gone away. It's kind of always been...
For better or worse, shall we say.
Yes, I would personally mostly say for the better, except maybe some of the weird merchandising stuff that's still happening to this day.
I mean, we can get into this later, but I would say yes, I would agree. For the better, had its influence lasted for, the 10, 15 years that a good influential work should, and not the, 2 to 3 decades in which it still casts a shadow over.
Oh, yes, there'll be plenty of time for that. So, while the show itself may not need any introduction, we sure do. So let's just kick things off by introducing our cast for this adventure. If you are a listener to our other podcasts, these are going to be some familiar voices. Also, thank you for listening. If not, then we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Jel. Some may say the Gendo Ikari of the Glorio Network. And you guys can't see me with my fingers up in front of my face right now as I'm talking to the microphone. But with me today, we have also Iro.
Hi, I'm still here. I guess if I'm a Neva character, I'm the third dude who sits at the console and shows up every episode but does nothing.
Would you be like, what's the guy's name? Futski? Is that the Colonel guy?
Oh, is that the old guy that stands next to
Gendo? No, for reasons we will eventually reach.
Oh, I was gonna say, is like, is that because you don't think you are worthy of that, or do you not want to be associated with that character?
You'll have to find out.
Yeah, we'll have to stay tuned and find out.
Sure.
And finally, we have the one and only G-Man.
So, I think that the unofficial/official title of this podcast should actually be Pilgrimage to Mecha, subtitle Neon Genesis EvanGLORIO. But
yes, that would make for a very long. That would make for a very long title in the post, unfortunately. But
indeed, so I'm willing to compromise.
Explain to the listeners what Pilgrimage to Mecha is.
Sure, seeing as we haven't had a new entry in that Glorio feature in, at this point, probably 2 to 3 years. But
maybe if you finish Zeta Gundam.
Look, I'm working on Zeta. It'll happen after I finish Legend of the Galactic Heroes. So never. But for those unaware, Pilgrimage to Mecha was a feature that I started on the Glorio blog a few years back. Kind of a play on the words, so to speak. As the designated Mecha fan of the Glorio chat, let's be real here, Mecha is my lifeblood, and in some ways has recently become part of my actual occupation. It is a genre that matters quite deeply to me, but no super fan is perfect, of course. There's always going to be those kind of holes in your knowledge base. So I kind of used Pilgrimage to Mecha as an excuse to kind of, get around to watching a lot of those perennial works that I had not watched, when I was younger. This includes stuff like Pat Labor or the original Mobile Suit Gundam. Kind of going back to these, for the most part, pretty old franchises, kind of watching them with a modern lens and discussing, basically what were my thoughts on those shows, and then perhaps more importantly, what was their kind of long-standing legacy on the genre, their effect on the genre. And I don't know, I think I did like 7-8 posts before life happened. So but it is a series that has always been near and dear to my heart, and one that I've always wanted to continue with. So with the way the season's turning out, we figured with not a whole ton to watch that I think now was a good time to finally get around to the legendary 1995 science fiction mecha anime.
Also, with its looming return on Netflix.
Yes, also that we want to beat the Netflix takes to the punch.
So that kind of, I guess the stars and planets kind of aligned up there. We've been looking for an excuse to make G watch Evangelion because he has not seen the full television series.
Yes,
yet.
That is the part I forgot to mention. Is that despite being the Mecha fan,
yes, so that was prime material for pilgrimage to Mecha, and with our podcasting thing going on, with that trying to get an excuse to make G watch it, and then finally the Netflix announcement. We're like, you know what? Maybe now is the time to go ahead and do this. So that's pretty much why we're here. We want to. We're going to watch the entire series, and I guess we haven't worked out the full details on the end movies, but definitely the end movies in some capacity. And
yes,
we'll probably do depending on how there are some recap episodes, so we'll figure out how that works. But generally, it'll be like 3 episodes per podcast, and we'll go through what happens in the episode and kind of use that as our springboard to get into some of the other stuff going on, some of the themes and context and other thoughts that we have. So I guess if you've watched the series before, which I should note that myself and Iro have seen the series, so it's going to be a bit of a mixed perspective. So if you've seen the series before, maybe now's a good time for a rewatch. If not, maybe you're going to plan on catching it the first time on Netflix. You can kind of just look at this as sort of a companion, as we'd encourage everybody to go ahead and watch along as we cover the show. So, all right. So, I guess kind of getting into. One final detail. We're all watching it subbed, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That was our final decision.
Yes,
I was kind of
there's the old dub, and my understanding is Netflix will have a new dub, but I figured I advocated for watching subtitled because it will be the same no matter when you watch it.
Yeah. And I've seen it. I've seen the series. I guess to give a little bit of my perspective, I saw the series shortly after it came out. And probably the last time I've seen it is maybe about 15 years ago. I have not seen it in a long time in its entirety. I've watched it at least twice, both subbed and dubbed, and I think they're both fine. I don't think you can particularly go wrong. And shout out to the original dub actors, because it's kind of heartbreaking with I saw the post going around from Tiffany Grant, who is the dub voice for Asuka in the original, where I guess they wanted to do it so bad that they actually went out to audition for it. They agreed to let them audition the original 3 actors for Asuka, Shinji, and Rei, and obviously Netflix didn't want them, so it was kind of sad hearing that whole story. But as Iro said, there will be a new dub on the way. We'll see how that goes. I haven't really watched too many Netflix dubs. I know they've had some trouble with their subs though, so I don't know if they're redoing. I don't know if they're redoing the script or how that's all going to work. We will see in the near future. I think the release was June, right?
I think that is what they said. Yes.
So that'll be coming very soon. But so if you're watching along, we're personally watching subbed. I honestly don't think it's going to harm your experience either way. So whichever you prefer, it should be fine. But
before we get to the main stuff, actually, well, real quick, Iro, when did you watch Evangelion? I'm actually curious.
Probably about a decade ago.
Okay. So kind of early 2000. Wait, oh god, it's 2019.
Late 2000s.
Yeah, late 2000s.
Post Gurren Lagann.
Interesting. Okay, post Gurren Lagann.
yeah,
It was not remotely my first mecha show.
Was it
post Fooly Cooly as well, or
yeah?
Interesting. Okay.
When did it end up on Toonami? Because that was like
I did not watch it on Toonami.
I'm not sure it actually aired on Toonami in its full
I don't believe so.
It was on it was
I think it might have been on the.
It was on
that might have
Cartoon
been it.
at some point. Yeah.
Because my memory of Evangelion. Here's the thing: if Evangelion had aired on Toonami, I think I would have watched it because, look, I watched fucking Gundam Wing. Okay, like if I could watch fucking Gundam Wing, I would watch any goddamn thing with robots in it back then. So I definitely would have watched Evangelion, but I did not. And
I think it was a very
confident.
I think it was a very limited run on like Adult Swim or something. I know it was definitely on.
That might have been the case.
I know it was definitely on Cartoon Network at some point, and I think it was like it might have been like 10 years ago. It was not like after. It was not soon after the series came out.
This was not. This was not like golden age of Toonami. Okay.
Then. Yeah, this is like later on. I'm sure I'll go look that up and just be completely wrong, but
maybe we'll find out. I mean, my suspicion is it might have been part of. Toonami had this promotional thing they did every year. It was called I forget what it was called. It was like Week of the Giant Robots or something.
Yeah, that is the only time it aired on Toonami. Is my understanding.
Oh, is that the case? Then that would be why. Because basically what they did is they licensed like 1 or 2 episodes of like a dozen different mecha anime.
Okay.
And would just like air them during that time slot to kind of just like. I don't know. I think I like to believe it's because they were passionate about giant robots. I wonder if it was them like post Gundam Wing being like, shit, we got to find a new like giant robot the kids are going to eat up. Let's just like shotgun blast them and see like which one, which one does well in the ratings. But
right.
Problem with that is that like a large part of my Toonami experience was in reruns. It was in catching up on episodes I missed because I didn't watch them the first time around. So
I found it. Okay, so it aired in 2003. The first 2 episodes aired in an edited format in 2003 on Toonami's Giant Robot Week.
Yep, there we go.
And then it aired in 2005 on Adult Swim, unedited.
It to completion?
Yeah.
Huh, I guess 2005. I probably should have watched it around then. Huh.
Yeah, because that's when I remember. I think that's when I remember it being out, and that was like 10 years after the show came out, so it was not like a, right after it came out thing or something. But
right, still, but okay.
It'll be interesting to see, because like I say, I feel like most anime fans have already seen Evangelion in one capacity or another. But I'm also an old man. I don't know what the kids are into these days. The kids know what Evangelion is. I mean, we had the movies, but I don't even want to. I don't want to talk about the movies on this podcast. But there's going to be a lot more people watching it now on Netflix because actually that is really the only official way there's going to be able to watch it right now. I mean,
unless you have purchased a now defunct DVD release.
Yes. I was going to mention I dusted off my. My old Platinum Collection DVD box set with the rather extensive episode notes. So, we'll probably chime in with a couple of those here and there.
I have the slightly less old box set.
Yeah, you have like the condensed size.
The holiday collection.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
I got the big like 6-inch wide, like giant thing with the individual volumes in it and the big shiny box with the art with the characters.
Like back in the days when one disc held like 3 episodes.
Yes, you had to pay like $30 a disc for each one, and yeah.
So perfect for our format, actually.
Yes, fun times. I'll just pop in a volume for every every podcast, but
But yes, if you'll allow me to, I'm sorry, Jel. I know you're hosting this podcast, and I don't mean to wrangle or to wrest control from you on on the rails here. But before we get into kind of discussing the episodes themselves, if you'd allow me, I'd like to kind of get into an aspect of this show that I think will make this more interesting than if this were just an Evangelion recap podcast. I kind of want to present a thesis, so to speak, on the show. In relation to the fact that I have never watched Evangelion.
Wow. Thesis on Evangelion. I've never heard that before.
But, I know, right? Crazy. Nobody's done that before.
But yes, please, G.
Sure. So
let's yes, go for it.
Let me have the floor on this because I feel like in many ways this podcast is happening because of my very long-standing, stubborn refusal to watch Neon Genesis Evangelion. Despite it being undoubtedly one of Studio Gainax's most important anime, and a large part of this is how should I put this? I hate the Evangelion fan base. I have very few kind words to say for them, and not everybody in the fan base, but certainly certain types, and I think that's going to lead into kind of my thesis about Evangelion. And my thesis is that at its core, Evangelion is a mecha anime. Now that's I'm sure that's very mind blowing to you guys.
Okay,
but allow me to elaborate. So basically, my biggest issue with that fan base that I just mentioned is that there are a lot of people in that fan base who like Evangelion, but both overstate its novelty while categorically ignoring other entries in the genre. You probably know the types of people I'm talking about. The people who say, "Oh, Evangelion is the only good mecha anime," or that Evangelion actually isn't a mecha anime because of X, Y, and Z, that it shouldn't be lumped in with the rest of the genre. And I have always believed that this argument, ranges from either disingenuous to kind of outright willfully ignorant of what the mecha genre has been and can achieve. In response to that, I actually believe that I think Hideki Anno and Gainax are huge mecha fans. That Evangelion was made and could only be made by somebody with an extremely deep appreciation for the genre and its conventions. And I think that anyone trying to claim that actually Evangelion is great because the people, making it hated mecha anime or quote unquote wanted to put mecha anime in its place are in fact very wrong. So a core aspect, I think, of my discussion of Eva, kind of in contrast with you two, since both of you guys have watched it while I am the one who has not, is I think one of the things I want to do with Evangelion is kind of talk about the things that it does that are actually deeply ingrained into the genre. And from my own perspective as a mecha fan who has watched, a lot of mecha anime, including shows much older than Evangelion, and try and get into like how the things Evangelion does, aren't actually necessarily that unique or original, but kind of owe a lot of their achievements to a long and venerable lineage of genre conventions. And I before I'm sorry, let me finish. I know this is going on a bit, but and again, this is not to say that Eva is not unique or that it doesn't do interesting and novel things. In fact, I think it does a lot of, in just these 3 episodes alone, there are a lot of really cool things this show does. But I think that by discussing, kind of where and how some of those images and conventions and tropes, kind of where they originate from, we can better appreciate the things that it does achieve and the things that it does do that are genuinely unique.
Yeah. Are we putting you on the couch here, G? Is it we're gonna work out your Evangelion issues here? And
again, I think I've made it pretty clear that my issue has never really been with Evangelion itself.
Yes.
It has been a two-pronged thing that we don't have to get into now.
Where
But
can we draw the line between your appreciation for the series and your annoyance with portions of the fandom?
That's why I'm looking forward to watching this show, to kind of finally put this to rest. Like, I am more than ready and willing to accept Evangelion into my life, while at the same time still talking extremely hot shit about its fan base at every turn, which I will continue to do so. I will never abate in that regard. We can listen to this recording when we get to the final episode, and I'm pretty damn confident, even after we finished Evangelion, I'm still going to have a ton of shit to say about the Eva fan base.
Oh, maybe it's best we're doing this before the Netflix premiere and get ahead of the new bad takes that will undoubtedly be popping up. But yeah, no, I get there is some pretty obnoxious portions of the Evangelion fandom over the years, but it is a good show. It's one of my favorites of all time. I'm technically part of the fandom, and I know you're not calling me out personally, but the and it definitely, I think it deserves its place as one of the greatest anime of all time. The reasons why may be debatable, perhaps, but and I also agree. I think it'll be an interesting discussion on how it is. And I introduced it as a mecha anime. It's a mecha anime. There's I
would agree.
I think anybody that disagrees with that does not understand how anime genres work. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting into it. So let's get into it.
Hell yeah.
All right, so we're gonna kick things off with episode 1, Angel Attack, and this is one of those shows that kicks right off into the OP, and I feel like we have to acknowledge Cruel Angel Thesis and ask the question: is Cruel Angel Thesis the greatest anime OP of all time? I want to just throw that out to you guys.
It's a banger, for real.
I have generally considered a top 2 along with Chala Head Chala. The order of which will vary depending on my mood.
I would definitely put it. I mean, again, I'll have to wait until I'm done with the show. I do like the OP a lot, though. It's visually striking, even if a lot of it is like rapidly flashing, just like visual bullshit. But it's a visually striking OP, and it's hell of a song.
Yeah. I think if you're going to judge, it's a good song, it's visually striking, and it's obviously had a huge, impact and staying power. I mean, everybody still knows.
Oh yeah,
Angel Thesis 20 plus years later.
I believe it is still the most sung song in Japanese karaoke places.
I mean, not to keep throwing fucking curveballs into this discussion, but as Iro can attest, it's kind of fascinating, Cruel Angel's Thesis, because like visually and musically, like, I'm not going to say it's like 100% unique, but it has such a striking aesthetic that it's kind of funny, because anybody who's familiar with like early 2000s mecha anime can see the like undeniable influence that Cruel Angel's Thesis had on the genre as a whole. Like, just the complete like the stark visual turn that anime OPs take during that time period, in that kind of post-Eva era.
Yeah, weren't you guys watching a video or something with like all the mecha OPs from like 1960 to 2015 or something, and like you can see you can see a couple of key lines, like when Gundam happened, and then like later on when Eva happened, and like it switched over.
Right, yes, like the two big lines are basically Gundam and Evangelion.
Right.
For like when all of a sudden you see these gigantic visual shifts in how mechs are portrayed and promoted in their opening sequences.
Yeah, so
But
you could do much worse in picking a greatest anime OP of all time, at the very least in just sheer
it is definitely,
notoriety.
yeah, definitely a respectable choice. I would definitely, again, without nostalgia going for it, I don't know where I would put it in my own personal, like, all-time top list, but it is without a doubt a really, uh, again, I keep saying the word. It is a really striking opening sequence.
Yeah. I also just want to get down on tape here that I've always thought it sounded suspiciously close to Madonna's Like a Prayer. Just going to throw that out there.
Huh.
Everybody think about that one.
Yeah, fucking play those
Anyway, so we kick things off with that great OP, and immediately we get like silence, and we get our opening shot with our main character Shinji Ikari. We see him right away in the kind of the ruins of the city, and he is trying to get in touch with Misato, who we don't meet at this point, other than a racy photo that she has sent to him, and she's trying to get in touch. He's trying to get in touch with her because she's supposed to pick him up or whatever. But
they didn't have cell phones yet.
No cell phones. Yeah, I love how well. So this is supposed to be taking place in what
2015.
Yes. So, but they still have the green Japanese payphones and whatnot, and our silence is quickly interrupted by the appearance of our first big monster, who is later referred to as the third angel, named Sakiel. And we kind of dive right into the action here, and Sakiel kind of gives us our first glimpse. Well, I'll turn you loose on this on a second, G. But our first glimpse at some of Evangelion's weird biomechanical type of monster and robot designs, which are very unique to Eva. There are probably some copycats after, but I feel like especially at the time, really kind of striking mix of like the biomechanical stuff and some weird like. Is this the first time we see exploding crosses? I think
the cross imagery is. Well, no, actually, technically, the first time we see cross imagery is in, of course, the classic game Bomberman. So clearly, Ava is copying the Namco Bandai classic.
Yes, yeah.
Hudson Soft, please.
Yeah, but
sure, fine. I forgot. Right. It was, well, look, they don't exist anymore, so
yeah, rest in peace, Hudson or whatever. But yes, so yeah, we kind of get that first glimpse into these kind of weird robot and monster designs that we're going to see more of. We'll probably talk more about when we get into Unit 1. But yeah, go ahead, G.
I definitely do dig. I think. It is impossible to, talk about mecha anime and monster design without talking about the angels. I think they come up, often and for good reason in mecha discourse, whether it is from the very low lows of Darling in the Franxx, from the very high highs of SS Gridman. And I think I actually kind of want to connect this to Gridman a bit because, yes, Gridman was obviously deeply inspired by Evangelion, but it kind of leads into kind of the actual comparison I would use with Angels, which is kaiju, actually.
Yes.
I think now that, some time has passed, I think it is actually fairly apparent that Anno is also quite a kaiju film fan, in addition to mecha. I think kaiju is another genre that he draws a lot of influence from.
Some of his earliest works were parody films of Ultraman.
Right. Yes.
He just did Godzilla a couple years ago, right? So
yes, and I think everybody always talks about how one of Anno's first hallmark roles in the anime industry was animating the war god from Nausicaa, the Miyazaki film where the like horrible fetus monster robot thing like gets released and goes on a rampage before horrifyingly melting into like a robo skeleton. A lot of the shots from those scenes were done by Anno.
Right.
Like This is a guy who clearly, we could get to a whole discussion about kaijus and monsters and what they represent, but I feel that would be disingenuous because I just do not know kaiju as a genre well enough. I don't know Sentai well enough to like really speak to it. I'm really looking forward to that new Godzilla movie that's coming out soon, but like I wouldn't say it's like an expertise of mine, but
Right.
I do think a lot of things about angels and the dynamic between them and the Eva units is Ano actually kind of exploring kaiju and Sentai elements of Mecha, you know, like
Right.
the whole monster attacking the city every week and the robot has to go fight it. But I think what it does differently than the kaiju is that the kaiju have always been costumes worn by people, correct? But I think for its time, what Ano does kind of unique from kaiju, and I can only speak to the like first two angels I've seen in this show so far, but having seen some of the other ones that show up later just through cultural osmosis, is that unlike kaiju, the angels are very intentionally designed to be things that could not be worn by a man in a rubber suit.
Yeah. Sakiel's close, other than his weirdly thin limbs,
it's close,
but
but
because he's still somewhat humanoid. But some of them, even the next one, which we'll get to in episode 3, is not a human shape.
Right. And I think that's kind of what helps give them their like very unnerving, otherworldly look. Like these are not humans in suits. There is no way for you to think of them as humans in suits, and that intrinsically makes them alien.
Yeah, they're pretty. Some of them are pretty damn creepy. But yeah, so Sakiel appears, and in true kaiju fashion, is immune to conventional weaponry. We get a lot of nice detailed shots of the Japan's Defense Force military trying.
Man, I don't want to keep interrupting, but man, I fucking really love the way old Gainax anime looks. Like, this is going to be a drum, in the same way that during our, Legend of Galactic Heroes podcast, you can continuously hear me and Iro repeat the words, man, Legend of the Galactic Heroes is a really good show. I think the thing you're going to keep hearing from me in this podcast is, man, Evangelion looks really good. Like, just that old school, like, Gainax hand-drawn look, just all that grit in the mechanical details, which I'll probably save for once we kind of finish discussing all 3 episodes as a whole. But there's a lot for me to love in the way Evangelion is drawn.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool contrast with like the angels and the Evangelion units too, because like they're so like bizarre and out there. Contrasted with the kind of the more grounded elements, which is, again, another thing we'll probably talk more about in like episode 3 too. But yeah, so Sakiel's smashing up the city and Shinji is in danger, but he gets picked up finally by Misato in her hot new sports car. We finally get to meet Misato for the first time, who is she's an interesting character.
A saucy young lady.
Yeah, she comes off as the irresponsible kind of adult here. I mean, we kind of got that impression from the photo from the first time we saw her, but nevertheless, she picks up Shinji, and through through wrecking her brand new car or whatever it was, she finally gets him to Nerve. And Nerve is the big military headquarters where Shinji has been called in by his father for reasons unknown at the moment. And Nerve is basically this big underground base, and they again, we still don't know why Shinji's there, but we see some of this stuff going on. We see we meet another character, Ritsuko, who's going to be another main character, who is mysteriously climbing out of a pool of water for some reason. But and the 3 of them, the 3 of them are basically going to meet Shinji's dad, who is, well, we'll get to Gendo in a minute. I did want to mention at this point they are going up like there's a really cool shot here where they're like going up the escalators, and you kind of see like the head of Unit 1 at this point.
Yeah.
in the background, and they're kind of talking about how I think it's Ritsuko, because Ritsuko is kind of like a scientist, the like the serious scientist type who's like
Right. She's the scientist in, character.
she's the foil to Misato, who's like the like silly irresponsible adult one. But the they see the big Unit 1 in the background, and they're like, oh, don't worry, there's only a 0.0000 whatever percent chance of activation on Unit 1 here, so you don't have to worry about that giant thing in the background.
But I do want to quickly talk about, like, I mean, again, I feel like I'm just going to keep repeating myself here, but I really do love the way this scene and like a couple of the scenes around this are shot. Like, it is like them descending in that like weird car elevator, the escalator, and like the the conveyor belt like walkways they're taking, that kind of just like you get a lot of these shots of like Shinji and of course the other characters being very small in these very large set pieces.
Yeah.
It does this really a really impressive job of kind of communicating scale, which again is like one of those things that, like, to kind of get into my thesis a bit, like, I'm not going to say, Evangelion is obviously not the first anime to communicate robots are really big, but I think what Evangelion does well, in large part due to Anno's directing, is do a really good job of executing, in the execution of communicating that scale. How big of a facility NERV is. I mean, it's literally a city, right? Like, it's a city-sized, like, Tokyo 3 is the NERV headquarters, basically.
Right.
And, like, it kind of communicates, like, how big robots are. Like, robots are big, man. Like, I think one of the only other examples, I think, that has ever has been equally effective at communicating the scale of giant robots, as well as what I'm seeing here at Evangelion, is from Mr. Tomino himself in Gundam F91. I think is the only ever time I've ever seen a robot scale communicated so effectively, and it's just really cool. It's like these very like long, stark shots that are kind of relatively quiet, that just kind of build up this sense of like unease and tension that, like, right, you still don't know. If I didn't know anything about Eva, you wouldn't know why that tension is there. But
it's there. Yeah, you see.
Yes.
You see Unit 1, and it's very menacing, like in that moment. And that's why Ritsu was like, "Oh, don't worry about it," or whatever, because they
have to take a boat across this like giant pool, and there's a quick shot of the robot's shoulder.
Yeah,
yeah.
Just like shots like that. Just, as an artist, just chef's kiss. Like, really, really, really good. Just like visual, like narrative storytelling.
Turns out, Anno's a really good director. Also worth pointing out, these first 2 episodes directed by Kazuya Tsurumaki of.
That's interesting that you mentioned him, because I have some things to say about that later.
Of Fooly Cooly fame, #Tsurumaki, and also the
Yes.
I guess the Evangelion movies is where he's been trapped for the past 15 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Or I don't know. Maybe I just fucking bring that up now because you invoked his name. But
yeah, I mean,
just kind of the well. I'll save it for later. I'll save it for another a thesis point I have once we get into it.
Okay, we can come back to that. But yes, a lot of cool direction, giving the sense of scale of NERV. It's this entire underground, like, flip side of the city above ground, basically. Like this whole like they call it the geo front or whatever, right? They're like underground, giant underground.
It's that cool
thing.
Sci-fi shit, like.
Yep. So we finally kind of get to our destination here in this big headquarters, and we meet Shinji's father, Gendo Ikari. And Gendo Ikari is notoriously a bad man. He's obviously does not have a very good relationship with his son. They've been living apart, as it's revealed, and he's only called him in because he has a very specific purpose for him. As it turns out, Shinji is one of the only people that can pilot this giant robot thing. And now that Gendo actually has a use for his son, he has called them in to help. And I feel like just going back to the like the 0.00001% chance thing, and then kind of up to this moment, I feel like this is kind of like our first, like, if we're going to talk about invoking mecha tropes.
Yes.
This is like the only this one guy can pilot this robot, and lo and behold, he's the only, despite that 0.000% one chance, he's the only one that can activate it, or somehow he can activate it despite the odds or whatever.
Of course. I mean, again, I think there's an aspect that of mecha anime that Evangelion is drawing from, which is that, mecha are inherently extraordinary. Like, regardless of the mundanity of the rest of the setting, giant robots are in and of themselves, an otherworldly, extraordinary concept, and I think a lot of that is done, very well in the way that Eva Unit 1 is portrayed and the way it is presented.
Right. It's the unique prototype super weapon thing to battle the the monsters, and so I guess while invoking those kind of mecha tropes, it also maybe asks a question that's maybe less commonly asked in mecha anime of what happens when the special hero doesn't want to pilot the robot.
Well, Joe, let me tell you about the 1979 classic Mobile Suit Gundam.
So I mean, that is a little bit different, though, right? I mean, kind of. And I think what I find interesting in Evangelion is, Shinji is a 14-year-old boy. He's, this is intimidating and frightening, and he's also kind of dealing with the fact of that, the issues that he has with his father in this situation. So, like, I feel like it's a kind of unique, almost more realistic type of reaction to this situation. Like, I don't think every kid is just going to be like, yeah, I'll jump in the robot and fight that giant monster thing.
Yeah, maybe their name isn't Koji Kabuto, but
well, I'm thinking of what would a real 14-year-old boy do in that situation. Some surely would just jump in the robot, but I think others would.
I think some of us are delusional enough that we would want to jump into the robot and not really worry about the consequences.
Right, but I think that's. Go ahead, G.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm sorry. Just the thing I want to kind of push back against is the idea that, like, the comparison is not entirely there. Like, I think the thing that they do really well with Shinji and his hesitance to get into the robot is, like, it is executed in a much more, I guess, as you say, a much more realistic, believable manner. But I would push back against the idea that it is that different from Amuro Ray's own trepidations about getting into the Gundam in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. In that show as well, which, again, from 1979, so it isn't executed with the same amount of nuance or visual fidelity, but the idea there is similar, that Amuro is afraid of getting into the Gundam because getting into the Gundam means war, it means fighting, it means conflict. And at least early on in the show, he is shown to be genuinely fearful for himself and those he has been suddenly tasked with protecting. There are a thing that I found striking back when I watched the original Gundam a few years back was actually how tense that show actually feels. Like, despite the bright colors and the kind of awful animation, like, they never stop reminding you that, like, they never stop reminding Amuro, like, Amuro, if you don't get in the Gundam and if you fuck it up, we're all gonna die. Like, this is all on you. Like, we will all die. And, like, there are sheets there, they show scenes of, like, the ship being shot at and people collapsing, and they keep reminding you that happened because Amuro didn't fight well enough. Like, these people are all getting hurt because of you, Amuro, and the pressure and the fear, it crushes him. It destroys him. And it takes fuck, man, it takes like a dozen goddamn episodes for that kid to finally, like, stop being so fearful of getting into the robot. But
Yeah.
they
I
definitely
mean,
do show it, and they definitely do make it a point that it is an important aspect of his character that he is afraid of getting into the robot. Now, the thing I would say that it differs from Ava is Amuro Amuro's motivations, his fears for his fear of getting into the robot is fairly simple. It's simple self-preservation. It's just I don't want to die, which, is an effective motivator, but I think what they do very well with Shinji and his hesitation is they make it so personal because the way the show is framed up until now, I think a thing that they do really well is they constantly emphasize, and they keep doing this in episodes 2 and 3. So maybe we're just front loading all our discussion here, but is they emphasize Shinji's alienation, his sense of isolation from the world. This idea that despite no matter what anybody says to him that sounds nice, it feels like they never really quite mean it. And then in cases like Gendo, where they make their intentions very clear, it makes it even more like emphasize just how little they matter to them, how little Shinji matters to them beyond his like cold, calculated utility as an Ava pilot. And that I think that is where it feels unique, where it feels like very well done. Is like is the part where it's not just self-preservation, it's not just his own life that Shinji fears. It is this feeling of rejection and like the realization, of like, look, no matter what your relationship is with your dad, like
you want your dad's approval, right? Like,
yes, on some level,
we're gonna get on
you
the
want his approval.
psychology 101 stuff here. Yes.
or not even his approval, but just like fucking,
you don't want whatever is happening.
He gives.
You don't want whatever's happening with Gendo, basically. But yeah. Yeah, I think to the Gundam comparison point, maybe it is just the kind of level of nuance in this situation, and you're right. I mean, Shinji doesn't want to just pilot the robot because his dad told him to, and that's all that he's good for, right? Like there's a lot of like
right.
There's a lot of different feelings going on in there, and it's not just fear of I'm going to die if I get in the robot, or everybody's going to die or whatever. There's a lot of other things.
And I think that does make it more effectively understandable.
Yeah. Just I wanted to point out that Gendo never actually says "get in the robot, Shinji," despite what the internet might tell you.
I mean, that's just that Luke, I am your father shit, right? Like,
yeah,
it's just
he actually just says "get in the robot" or "don't." I don't care, but if you're not going to, get out of here.
Right.
Misato is actually the one that comes closest. I was gonna say Misato is actually the one that comes closest to actually telling him to get in the robot.
Well, I think I kind of love the dynamic here, where first like it's kind of like, I mean, it's not actually what it is, but the scene almost feels like a weird like if like emotionally in the room, it feels like Gendo, Mitsuko, and Ritsuko and Misato are like huddled in a corner, be like, all right, Misato, you go first. Try to get him to get into the robot, right? So like Misato's out there like, hey kid, please, you gotta get in the robot. Oh, hero. She's like, she is the most like classic robot, like, mecha anime character of like, oh, be a hero, get in the robot. And then when that fucking doesn't work, Gendo's like, all right, fine. I didn't want to, whatever. We're doing this my way. If you don't get in the robot, that girl is, and that's gonna be your fault. Which
yes, well, that's the ultimate. Once it doesn't look like Shinji's going to get in, he plays the trump card there, and
right, just emotional manipulation.
Yes, so he carts out. We get our first, well, I guess technically our second glimpse of Rei, who is injured from fighting earlier, and she's still strapped in her hospital bed and bandaged up, and Gendo's like, well, if you're not going to do it, I got to stick her in there. And that finally...
cut out the sick girl.
Yes. And upon seeing the sick and injured girl, Shinji finally decides to comply and gets in the robot. And yeah, we kind of get our first glimpse of the insides of Unit 1 and the weird LCL thing, which people aren't familiar. It's basically fills up with this gross liquid where you have to like it does like the it like does the breathing for you or something. I don't know. I'm not even sure why it's there.
I mean, this is technically a real concept.
Liquid breathing.
Yes, liquid breathing, of using highly oxygenated liquid to
fill your lungs and
yes.
If we want to get into visual metaphors, it's probably some kind of birth thing or something, but
sure. But
yeah,
I think I actually want to get into here now here's where I can finally talk about Tsurumaki a bit. But I really love, like, as a whole, like, maybe my overarching love of Evangelion so far, and I think is like really well established here in this scene where it is the Eva unit is getting launched. You know, this is the launch scene. I think, you know, this is one of the most iconic moments a mecha anime can have, right? Is the launch sequence. You know, prepare the Gundam, you know, prepare Unit 1, prepare whatever, right? Like the moment where the mech powers up and like the physical barriers are released and the restraints are taken off, and all that stuff, right? And I think what Evangelion does really well is evoke the kind of the mechanical physicality of giant robots. You know, like, this scene is like top tier Gainax lovingly animating, like, you know, oh, these panels are moving and like these hydraulic pistons are like, you know, are pumping, and like, you know, these gears are turning, and like, you know, the plug is being inserted in. You have all these cables going around, and like, you know, the whole fucking room is like splitting apart to make room for the Eva, and it's like moving on this belt to like, you know, lock into like the like elevator thing and all this shit. Like, it's some really magnificent stuff. Yeah. It more than almost any other mecha anime I could think of does a better job of like really kind of presenting the mech as this very kind of real, worn, physical object that presides in the space. And the reason I want to talk about that, and a little bit in relation to Tsurumaki, is that, you know, is kind of to relate this to other mecha anime that have done this. While I think Eva is probably, off the top of my head, maybe one of the best at this, I do want to speak to the idea that, like, despite the Eva unit's very like weird, intentionally like, you know, off-putting design, there's a very kind of real, grounded physicality to everything that happens around it, you know. And I want to tie this specifically to another mecha anime, a far more humble one in terms of its scope, but I wanted to tie this to Patlabor. And for those unfamiliar with Patlabor, it's basically a police procedural, except the cops in question deal with giant robot crime. And they deal with giant robot crime. Yes, exactly. They police giant robots with their own giant robots. And one aspect of Patlabor is intentionally about the mundanity of giant robots. This idea that, well, if giant robots exist, yeah, we'd probably be like super like enthused about them for a little while, and then they just become mundane again. You know, like, they would become as mundane as construction equipment or a car is. You know, like nobody sits in traffic and is like, wow, cars, huh? Cars are amazing. No, everybody's like, no, the car is a car. But now, what happens if that's how you treat your giant robot?
Right.
And that's kind of Patlabor in the sense that, like the mech doesn't launch. The mech has to be transported to a crime scene on a flatbed truck. Right. Like, you know, if the giant cop robot needs a gun, you know, it can't, like, you know, it doesn't like summon one out of nowhere. Somebody has to put that gun into a pickup truck and drive it to the crime scene. And, there's a really lovely like physicality to that. And the reason I want to bring that up is because one of the key animators for Pat Labor was one Kazuya Tsurumaki. And in addition to a few other Gainax names. But I kind of want to bring up this idea that like that physicality has kind of always existed in mecha anime. It kind of began to become fully explored around the early 90s. And then I think that Evangelion is kind of where I kind of see, like, in a lot of ways, the kind of peak of that mentality of how to approach how a giant robot is portrayed.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, I do love that physical element to Evangelion, but for me personally, it's like not always the first thing I think about. Like I always think, the bright color, spindly, weird looking organic robot things. And then it's again, like I said earlier, it's an interesting contrast with how like grounded, how much like you think about just like how much you think about how much support is just needed to like keep these things running, and that kind of I think of the thing we keep seeing popping up throughout the series, like we'll see in episode 3 particularly, and later on in the series, where like it takes like the entire country basically to keep these things moving.
Totally, I love that. I love that aspect of Evangelion. Like, not to get too much of the next episode, but like, motherfucker, they pick up his head with a crane, like that's like, here's the thing. I recognize that like as an artist, as an illustrator, like maybe my brain is just configured to think about like these things a little bit differently, but those are the things I notice, and those are the things that I myself am loving in Evangelion, is just the way this stuff is portrayed, like you said, like it takes a city, it takes a country to support one giant robot.
Yeah.
And I truly love that aspect of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned getting into episode 2, so let's get into episode 2. This is titled The Beast, and starting from here on, every episode is going to have 2 titles. There's one in English and one in Japanese. So episode 2 is The Beast, and the Japanese title is Unfamiliar Ceiling. And I guess episode 1 wrapped up with, the Unit 1 launching, and between the end of episode 1 and the beginning of episode 2, basically getting destroyed by Sakiel, who just because Shinji got the robot to activate, but he doesn't know he's the first time he's been in it. He has no idea how this thing operates, and he can barely even walk, and he just gets
he gets wrecked.
Yeah, he gets wrecked pretty bad and basically blacks out. And so it's kind of an interesting format for how this story gets told, because they kind of skip ahead to him waking up later,
right
in the hospital, presumably a few days later. And I think is this the first time we hear the cicadas? It's the first time I noticed them.
Were they in episode 1?
I don't think they're in. I think they've got to be in episode 1.
I think they are. Yes, I think they are, because one thing I wrote down in my notes that we didn't really get to, or we kind of did, is just like, the long stretches of silence that are in Evangelion.
Yes.
And I think silence in my head, but I know that in those long stretches of silence, there were probably cicadas that I have already begun to just filter as white noise during those scenes.
Yeah. Silence and or cicadas is basically the biggest chunk of soundtrack for Evangelion. And, I kind of like it. You just see, I think this was the first time, as I was, getting more into anime, 20 plus whatever years ago, and kind of figuring out what I like about it compared to like, Western animation stuff or other cartoons or whatever, like the use of silence, I just always like,
yeah, totally.
And kind of like the negative space of, either no sound or very minimal action or whatever. When used effectively, it's just like such a great mood setter. And
totally. I mean, I think we talked about, again, obviously it goes the other way around, but I feel like that's a large aspect of like why everybody was talking about the comparisons between Gridman and Evangelion, right? Like, obviously, Amamiya was, took a huge amount of inspiration from Evangelion, but like kind of a similar idea of like, what did they say about jazz? It's the notes you don't play, right? Like,
right. Yeah. or like I was mentioning, like negative space in like design or something, like
Yeah, exactly.
leaving the room to breathe there. And I love that. And Evangelion's like one of the best examples, which we'll see throughout the series, of how to do that. But yeah, we Shinji wakes up after blacking out, several days later in the hospital, and I guess it looks like things kind of turned out all right. Everybody's still alive.
Yeah, I mean, they're like I said, they're picking up its head with a crane, and they're looks like they're loading shells into like a giant building or something, and just all these kind of great, again, like mechanical detail shots of them like picking up the pieces of the fight.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, everything seems to be calm at the moment. All of our main characters are still alive. We still don't know what happened yet, but something seemed to have happened, and we kind of get our first introduction to Gendo's bosses. He has people to answer to, and they're not big fans of Nerve. They keep saying it's a waste of money, because Gendo's like, "Hey, I got to pay for this, billions of maybe trillions of dollars to keep this robot running, and he needs more money."
Yeah, I gotta keep.
And
the scene was interesting to me because the way I always remember the council or whatever is the big monoliths that's a sound only.
Yes.
Other than the visor man, and so seeing all these other weird looking dudes was like, oh, there are people here. I'm not used to these people being here at all.
Yes, Iro, I'm actually glad you brought that up. I was going to keep my mouth shut because I didn't want to sound like a fool. But I was about to say is like, again, having absorbed a lot of Evangelion through cultural osmosis, I was like, weren't these dudes like just giant blocks? But I suppose is that it? Well, don't actually tell me, but I suppose that is a later development.
Yeah. Probably best
it is interesting.
Leave that one alone for now. But yes, at this point, we can actually see Gendo's bosses, and they're not super happy, even though he apparently did. We don't know what happened yet, but even though he apparently fought off the angel, they're still not happy about this, and they keep saying how this whole project is a waste of time.
I mean,
instead, he should be focusing on the human instrumentality project.
Yes, we get kind of
yes, they do name drop that.
Our kind of first mention of human instrumentality, which they feel should be the priority here. Which I don't know. I don't even want to touch that one right now. But
let's not.
Yeah, let's keep moving along.
It does create a mystery.
Yeah,
goes through the show.
What could be a bigger priority than keeping
than a giant robot?
Yes, there you go, G.
Maybe, I don't know.
What could be a bigger priority than a giant robot? I mean, come on.
I struggle, but also like it's again like it's kind of a common trope actually. Like the giant robot that nobody likes but keeps getting results. Like, why are you spending all this money on a giant robot?
Right,
that money could be used on conventional weaponry or something.
Right. The higher ups, the man always has to find a reason to get mad about them getting
right. Even though the first episode established beyond a doubt that conventional weaponry is useless.
It doesn't fucking do shit.
Not even an N2 mine can blow up an angel, but
not even.
Yeah. So yeah, Shinji wakes up and he's got to figure out where he's going to live now. It's determined him and Gendo don't want to live together. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But rather than letting Shinji live alone, Misato volunteers to take her in with him.
Yes, she needs a manservant.
Yes. So somebody's got to take care of him, right? But so that kind of leads to, we get our sort of more lighthearted sort of break here, I guess, after the intensity of episode 1 and the kind of brutal beating we saw Unit 1 taking. And
look, Misato said in the episode preview she was going to give us some fan service. So
yeah,
now we're going to get it.
Yeah. So we head back to were you going to say something, Iro? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's visually made clear that they're the only people living in this entire apartment complex. and
Yeah,
but Shinji still has to live in the same apartment as her, and not like next door,
same tiny
which I thought was
apartment.
kind of interesting.
Although
Yeah,
by like
sorry, go ahead.
Japanese city standards, it's actually a pretty decent sized apartment. But yeah, they say yeah, it's kind of an interesting visual there. That Shinji still has to put up with this, even though he could literally live anywhere else. But yeah, we kind of get a little bit of the we see Misato's apartment, which she's apparently a slob.
Turns out Misato is a nightmare person.
She's got some decent liquor though.
Yeah,
Yeah, but also look, I have known. Look, in college, I have known a Misato, right? Like the kind of person who is friendly and easy to get along with, but also they specifically get a neat and tidy roommate because they cannot take care of themselves. And they know that as long as they share the rent with a person who does care, that person will always take care of it because they themselves cannot stand living in that filth.
Yeah, so it does kind of work out that way as we get the little montage of them like divvying up the chores, and somehow Shinji gets like 90% of them.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a bit of a lighthearted interlude here. We're introduced to Pen the penguin, which Misato just randomly has in her apartment.
He lives in the second refrigerator.
Yes, because as you do, you keep your second refrigerator for your pet penguin. And just some good gags. I like I like the gag when Shinji runs, another classic, where it runs out of the bath, and
oh yeah,
they cover up his junk with one of Misato's beer cans, and then she moves in, and it's a smaller jar of toothpicks.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Oh man, I fucking lost it at that. That was a
so there you go.
Genuinely fantastic gag.
It is a classic.
Evangelion, not just psychological drama, also some pretty good comedy bits, and I think it works great in this episode because you have kind of the ups and downs of like the battle, and then the quiet bits and the funny bits, and we get to things kind of settle down once Shinji gets into the apartment. He finally has kind of a moment alone to think about what happened, and that's when the memories come back to what actually happened in the battle. And it just to finish that point, just like the whole contrast of it, I thought it was like kind of a neat way to present it instead of just showing what happened. But yeah, he remembers what happened, and Unit 1 basically went berserk.
Yes.
We kind of get some glimpses that it's not a regular robot. It does not appear to be. There's some kind of biological thing going on in there once we see kind of the armor cracked off and everything. And once it goes berserk, it literally just eats Sakio. Like it just
fucking rips the shit out of that angel.
Like brutally, savagely murders like rips like one of the bone things off it and stabs it with its own bone type of like brutality. It's quite a it's an impressive scene.
I really like this moment.
Yeah, and if I can dip into the platinum notes here, it mentions this fight. One of the key animators was Gainax's young ace, Yo-Yo Shinari, was involved.
Oh, really?
In this particular fight, which I just found calling Yo-Yo Shinari the young ace amusing.
I mean, I mean, and there's a part of me that still sometimes, there is often a part of me that still likes to think of Yoshinari and Amaishi and Sushio and those guys as
the young guns.
The young guns of Gainax. When like realistically now those dudes are like pretty old. Well, not old, but they are,
they're approaching 50.
They're at least they are in their middle ages, at this point. But if you let me talk about this fight a little bit, I really like this fight because Again, I feel like this is one of those areas where I think Eva does something uh, very unique, but also it is based in there's a foundation in this lineage that I actually really like. As we call it, the bestial nature of the Ava unit, and the way it fights, and the way it like in the way it is, kind of monstrous, right? Like we have the scene where, is it episode 2 where Shinji looks in the building and sees the reflection of
Yeah, because I think that's
Yeah.
when he blacked out, right? That's when he blacks out. when he sees
yes.
the
I
eye.
love this because now I don't want to get like too into it, or I guess I'm going to, because I love mecha anime, so sorry.
That's why
But
yep.
there's often this kind of deeper discussion when it comes to mecha anime, usually couched in the kind of tenets of kaiju related mecha anime, of the idea that mechs are also monsters, that a mech is a monstrous creature. It might not be, tentacle and talon, but a mech is an innately monstrous creation. They're the modern example I like to use, for example, is like people like to poke fun at the tagline of the Del Toro movie Pacific Rim. The tagline of that movie is, "To fight monsters, we created monsters." And some people are like, "Oh man, what a cliche." Meanwhile, I'm over here, fucking raving like a lunatic. Actually, no, Del Toro is a genius. He understands.
He gets it.
Del Toro innately understands better than almost anybody in Hollywood what a giant robot is. A giant robot is a monster.
Right.
It is a monster of our own design.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a history to that. But the thing is that history is never that, or there's a subtext to that has been explored in mecha anime, but that subtext has never been made text, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is pretty clear. This is like pure savagery, like
exactly. Like people have often used that. Yeah, people have often like said, "Oh, the robot is a monster" as a metaphor, but Eva is just like, actually, what if we made that metaphor physical? What if we actually just made the giant robot this as monstrous as its reputation should make it? To bring up Gundam again, one of the classic nicknames for the titular Gundam is the White Devil. This is a name used by its enemies. It is a name uttered in fear.
right.
In the original Gundam, they make it a point to show plenty of scenes of like poor Zaku like pilots, bad guy grunts, like literally like shitting and pissing themselves in fear because, oh god, scouts report that the Gundam is here. The Gundam has appeared on the battlefield. The White Devil has arrived. This idea that the robot is not just the robot is not just a powerful war machine, but it is a terrifying harbinger of conflict.
Right.
And
it almost becomes like a fantasy creature, like a legend or a myth or something, right? Like,
right, yeah. Spoken in the ways of like trolls and dragons and such. And I think what Eva does so well, in part because of its amazing visual direction, is instead of couching that in metaphor and rhetoric, the Eva unit is just simply monstrous. It is a mean, nasty, terrible creature.
Yeah. Hence the appropriate title, The Beast. Although if I can quote the Platinum Collection notes again, they ask, is this beast referring to the Angel or Eva Unit 1, which went out of control, or the impulse to destroy hidden within Shinji? Something to think about as we get into episode 3, which is titled, the English title is A Transfer, and the Japanese title is The Phone That Never Rings. And so having gotten past the first battle there and sorted out his living arrangements, it's time for Shinji to go to school. And of course, Shinji just moved here. He has no friends.
I do like that it is a 2 weeks later thing. Like, they don't show him being introduced to the class.
Yeah. There's no, like, here's your new transfer student, Shinji Ikari.
Right. Like, you always expect that scene in anime, right?
I mean,
like,
we'll get it eventually here.
I mean, yes. I know about other characters in this show.
Right. But in this case, they kind of just dive right into it. We can kind of see, because you'd expect he wouldn't have friends like on the first day or something, but you can see he's still having trouble kind of fitting in even, a little bit later. Which I think here is where Ritsuko, I think it's Ritsuko mentions the hedgehog's dilemma, right? And
Yes.
which ironically is the title of the next episode, but they mention it here, which is, the concept of, the closer we get, the more we can potentially harm each other, right? And that kind of push and pull where, we want to be, we want, maybe I can quote currently airing Sarazanmai, we want to be connected, but we also, want to, we want to keep a certain amount of distance. And, that's kind of what Shinji ends up struggling with, in throughout the course of the series, but particularly here as he's trying to adjust to his new school life. And we get hit with a couple of new characters. We very briefly meet Hikari, which we'll see more of later. She's the class rep. But we're introduced to Kensuke and Toji, who are kind of his most prominent male classmates that he kind of sort of befriends, I guess.
The those two guys of anime.
Yes, the two, yes. And we have Kensuke, who's kind of like the dorky military nerd guy who's really into the military tanks and planes and whatever secret thing is happening with Unit 1, because obviously there's a media blackout on all that. And we get Toji, who's kind of the tough manly man guy. They kind of interact a bit in this part, but I guess we get more into that later. Toji is a bit resentful, I guess, of whoever the Evangelion pilot is, because he appeared to get his ass beat, and also
he did such a fucking shit job of the fight.
Yes, and also he wrecked like half the city, and his sister got injured in the fight. So he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, let's say. But
I mean, I kind of like this bit here because it kind of gets into the is Toji kind of a dick? Yes, but also is his frustration and resentment unwarranted? Like, not exactly.
Yeah.
In the sense of I mean, again, like a lot of mecha anime have done this, like the quote unquote the human cost of a mech being a mech.
Right. Yeah, Toji does some, kind of bad stuff in this episode, but you also kind of get the impression that maybe that's not really who he is. But yeah, so we meet his classmates. I thought it was interesting. Somewhere in the background here, we get the teacher talking a little bit about Second Impact.
Right.
Yes.
Giving us a little kind of sneaking in a little bit of exposition as to how we got here, because there hasn't been any up to this point. There was apparently some kind of big explosion from a meteor or something that was a pretty apocalyptic type of event.
There's also some foreshadowing here, I think, because they talk about how there's way less people in class because everyone moved away because of the incident.
Yeah.
But Toji also says his parents work at the lab, so you can kind of extrapolate that everyone who's here still will be, is important to the effort somehow.
Right. They have some kind of connection to Nerve or what's going on there, right? Like,
yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's kind of why I said earlier, it was like, I think at this point, I think all of Tokyo 3 is basically Nerve headquarters, right? Like the only people left in this city are the ones who want to stick around next to a giant robot largely because they have to. So
I mean, we see Shinji's class is like, only like half full or something like that. There's not really, or less. Yeah. There's not really like a lot of kids there or whatever. But yeah, while in class, word gets out on their high tech text messaging system that there's rumors that the pilot of the Evangelion is in class, and somehow they kind of decipher that it's well, I think they just ask him, right? they figure out it.
Yeah, they literally.
Yes,
It's literally like it's the most text impossible. It's like if this were in English, it would literally be the text would literally say like R as in the letter R, U as in the letter U. Are you the Ava pilot? Y/N.
yeah,
Probably with an emoji attached somewhere.
some real top-notch detective work there.
Yes.
So the crowd goes wild, and
Well, Shinji being a dumbass answers yes.
yes.
So.
Would you say he's probably supposed to keep that all top secret or whatever? Which
I was say you think that maybe
they didn't tell him
Ritsuko or
to,
Misato-
so
Apparently not. I mean, I guess they only ever dealt with Ray up to this point, and
Ray
doesn't talk.
Ray doesn't talk. But
the fact that we've only mentioned Ray like once so far probably is telling. But they did give it. Misato did give him the Nerve handbook that had the "For Your Eyes Only" on it. So I don't know. Maybe that's some classified stuff in there. But yeah, Shinji is temporarily a bit popular. But as we mentioned, Toji's not particularly happy about this because of the aforementioned reasons, and he drags him out back and beats him up, which is which is like we said, a bit of a dick move at this point, but because he
again, like I don't hate him for it for sure. Like hey, that it's an entirely reasonable, understandable response.
I don't think I could understand being upset. I don't think there's any other than like even he says, which I always thought was kind of a weird line, something like, "Hey, sorry, I had to beat you up because I had to blow off some steam or whatever," or something to that effect. I forget exactly what he says. I always thought that was kind of weird line.
I wonder if that's like a real like Japanese thing. Like
yeah, like
I wonder if that's how Japanese people bully each other. Like, hey, sorry, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you
to work out my own anger or whatever. And it's like that doesn't make it okay, but this will come into play a bit later as we are introduced to our next angel. The next angel attacks, and we get to see the fourth angel, Shamshel, which looks.
I don't think did they even mention its name in this episode, or is
They do not really ever mention the names of the angels within the show.
Did they mention any of the names? Because like you mentioned Sakiel, and like that's the one I knew because
there's all supplementary material stuff.
Yeah. So
okay.
For the purpose of podcasting, I'm just giving you the names. But yes, I didn't actually say them in the show or whatever. But
I was gonna say just the big red slug.
Yeah, it kind of looks like you guys know what like a flatworm looks like?
Yeah, there we go.
It looks very much like a flatworm until it like kind of stands up. I've heard many people also compare it to a penis because this is the episode with the male bonding, but that's just a theory as far as I know.
I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Sometimes an angel is just an angel.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, sometimes
I've heard that on more than one occasion, but yes.
Yes, I think sometimes a cross-shaped explosion is just a cross-shaped explosion.
No, nothing to read into there, folks. Move along. But yes, so the fourth angel shows up and starts smashing stuff up again. And Kensuke, being the military nerd, wants to sneak out and see it. They've all been recalled to like the underground shelters and everything, and they're just kind of sitting around waiting. So, his theory is, well, there's a good chance we're going to die anyway, so I might as well see the angel before in the Evangelion fight before I die, right? So
I like that. I like that mentality. I think Kensuke's got a good head on his shoulders.
It's sound logic, right? But so he convinces Toji to sneak out of the shelter with him, and they kind of go off to find the Evangelion. I wanted to bring up here kind of what we were talking about earlier, but just reiterating. Just love how like the contrast of the weird far out there Evangelion designs and the kind of grounded in reality like limitations they have, because this is our first glimpse at the famous 5-minute battery life limitation, where the Evangelions literally have to have a giant plug in their back, or they have to go on battery power, and they're so strong.
Very, very subtly referred to as the umbilical cord.
Yes. Very subtle there.
Yes.
or they have to go on battery power, and since they're so powerful, they can only last for 5 minutes. Very convenient
Yes.
narrative device.
I mean, to kind of speak to this mundanity, actually, like, I mean, I know you mentioned the cable, but I actually want to talk about, and I know this is definitely just me looking way too deep into this, but also, like, it is me looking way too deep into this in the way that somebody who draws for a living does, and that is that when Shinji, being a dumbass, gets his rifle, like, cut up, and he needs to get a spare rifle, like, he, like, and here's the thing: it comes with that one like lovely piece of concept art for Ava that I always talk about. But like, he grabs a spare rifle out of a building, like out of a giant building shaped rifle rack, right?
Yeah.
Like, he basically opens up the side of the building, and there's like a rifle there, and he grabs it, right? And it's like, I think there's something really lovely there about this idea of trying to, in universe, this desire to maintain the illusion of normalcy in a city that is clearly no longer normal.
Right.
Like in many ways, the nature of the Ava is, or at least the existence of the Ava unit is public knowledge, right? I mean, Kensuke knows about it. People know a giant robot defends Tokyo 3 from a giant monster every fucking couple of weeks to decades, apparently. Like,
and people in Tokyo 3 seem to, at least.
Yeah, so people know about the giant robot, right. But like, there is this desire to still, like, so in that case, like, if everybody knows about the giant robot, why not just leave the giant rifle hanging there in the middle of the city? You know, not like fucking anybody else is gonna like steal it, right? Like, it's for the giant robot that lives under the city. But there's this like fun, I think, like interesting desire that is reflected by the inhabitants of Tokyo 3 that like, no, we're gonna hide it inside of a giant fake building because like we want to maintain the illusion, right? We want to pretend we still live in a normal world and not one in which a giant robot pulls a rifle out of a fake building. Right. And it just kind of builds to those details that I really love about what I've seen so far in the show of, again, just like that mechanical physicality of it, and again, yeah, totally like contrasted, like all those gritty details contrasted against the very like otherworldly creatures, they're tasked with fighting. Right.
Yeah, it's just kind of neat seeing those things that are like it's not realistic because obviously none of this could ever really happen, but there's a lot of thought that's put into like, well, if it did happen, what were some of the practical, how would people feel about these things? What are some of the practical concerns that people would have? And, like how would that all pan out? And it's just like a really cool level of detail with stuff like that. And it just looks cool pulling a giant gun out of a building or whatever. But
I mean, look, there's an aspect of this where I am doing what the people who try to analyze the crosses in Evangelion do, of looking way too deeply into this, but also like I just like it as a very cool visual image, and I think that it's a lot of what Ava does well is just a lot of cool imagery.
It can be both things, right? But yeah. So yeah, Shinji is fighting the angel, and we kind of get the reveal that once he gets his cord cut, he's only got 5 minutes of battery life left.
It's a very Ultraman kind of thing. His Ultraman can only transform for 3 minutes.
Yes. Like I said, it's a convenient narrative device to add some immediate tension. And so they're saying, pull back, Shinji. We'll get you plugged back in and fight again. And he decides to go for it. Whether that was a smart decision or him just really wanting to kill this thing. We talked about the end of episode 2, who is the beast here. He pulls out his. Was there a special name for the knife? I forget now.
The progressive knife.
Yes, the progressive knife. Man,
earlier when speaking to his classmates and they asked him what his robot's killer move was, he's like, I guess it's a knife.
A very normal looking knife. There's not like really any
delivering on that promise.
Yeah.
It's like a vibro knife.
It's a cool knife. It's a high frequency blade.
True. Yes.
You know, it's like all, you know, it is the cooler cousin of the beam sword.
The vibro knife. Yes, because you need something to cut through those angels' AT fields, which I don't think we've said yet on the podcast, but they're absolute terror force field things that nothing can penetrate except the Evangelion.
I mean, yes, is there explanation for why conventional weaponry doesn't work on the angels?
It also had that one cool shot where Unit 1 like literally rips it apart with its fingers. Or like
Yes.
that was in the previous fight, but it makes a neat visual at the very least. But so yeah, Shinji decides to go for the kill, even though he's got 5 minutes left, and in true dramatic fashion.
There's a really great visual here where he has the same like dead-eyed face he has at the start of the episode, where he's just mindlessly shooting in the simulation, and then the second it switches to 1 minute left, flies into like berserker rage.
Yes, yeah, right. Because in the beginning they had showed the little training montage where they're like point at the target, pull the trigger, and he's just like completely like just blank faced and following orders or whatever. So yeah, that was a kind of a neat, visual, perhaps look into Shinji's state of mind at this point. But so yeah, in true dramatic fashion, though, the angel dies right as the 5 minutes runs out. I guess we forgot to mention, because that's kind of important. During the fight, he runs into Kensuke and Toji, who are trying to get a look at the battle. And
you have to let them into the cockpit.
Yes. So at that point, he has to let them into the cockpit, and they have a bit of a change of heart on Shinji, I think, because they kind of see what this what fighting the angels is really like, right? And I think at this point, I think I put in the notes, Shinji almost makes a friend by the end of this, but yeah, so that kind of wraps up episode 3, and I think we're going to pick up a little bit more on that stuff in episode 4. But yeah, that's the introduction to Neon Genesis Evangelion. G, do you have any initial?
There's the 3-episode rule.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
I was going to ask
one at a time.
Yeah, what were you saying, Iro? 3-episode rule. Is Evangelion still worth watching after 3 episodes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess if we want to talk about my early impressions, like I said, I mean, I think, like I said at the very top of this, I never disliked Evangelion itself. The show itself, I never really held a grudge towards. The grudge I held towards Eva was more related to its legacy and the causality of its existence, which, I can go into a very long spiel about how I low-key, think that Eva basically killed mecha anime, but we can save that for, another day.
Yeah, I think that'll be a more interesting topic once we get, through it all.
Yes, but I will say that, in terms of early impressions, again, I am really enjoying what I've seen so far. That said, I will say what I am enjoying so far are the stuff that could be described as my brand of bullshit, the rifle coming out of the building, the part where they pick up Unit 1's head with a crane, the very physical nature of the show. Those are the things I really love. The narrative, I'm fine with it. I mean, it is what it is. It is a perfectly sufficient vehicle to carry this, at least so far, Monster of the Week robot anime. But for me, it is definitely the visual execution of it. The really excellent, visual directing and the shot composition and the eye for mechanical detail and just everything related to the way it's drawn. I am super in love with it. In terms of everything else, I'm kind of more ambivalent on, honestly. The plot is fine, Shinji is. Look, I will say that I think in many ways we picked a good time to watch.
Just say
Evangelion.
what you told me when we were watching.
All right, I think Shinji is a fuckboy.
Oh boy.
Like, I don't like him as a character.
uh,
I think he sucks. But I like the show, and that's the differentiation I am making here. Is that I think when I was younger, I could not watch a show the protagonist I did not like. In my head, a good show needed a likable protagonist. They needed a protagonist I could like enjoy watching them succeed in. But now that I've gotten older and more mature, and like I'll put it this way: when we watch Legend of the Galactic Heroes, I still like the Reinhardt episodes. I don't like him as a person, but he's a good character, and I'm beginning to think that's probably going to be eventually my feelings on Shinji. Is that I can totally respect and understand the intentionality of his character, like the way he is written, the way he is presented. I totally get it. Like, I don't want anyone out there fucking saying, "Oh, she just doesn't get Shinji. He's not smart enough to." Like, fuck off with that shit. Like, I totally get what they're doing with Shinji's character. That doesn't mean I have to like him very much.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think I remember saying those exact words when I first watched the show, like 15 years ago or whatever.
Really? You said you coined the term fuckboy?
Well, I don't think that term existed back in 1998 or whatever, but I remember having the conversation with my friends how like, oh, I hate Shinji, and like he's such an annoying character, but I like that but I think he's, like, you can have a character who's like, you don't necessarily like him, but you understand what they're doing with him, and you like his position in the show, like that's like the purpose he's serving or whatever. And that was
yeah, totally.
So
I
yeah, so I was gonna say, like, everything you said was pretty much how I felt when I first watched the show. I'm finding now, 20 years later or whatever, with kind of, I guess, two things here, if I can make it slightly serious, but me just getting older and perhaps maybe a little more sympathetic. And also, I think hearing more about how a lot of what Shinji goes through in Evangelion is sort of a allegory for Anno's own coping with depression, kind of made it put Shinji's story in a kind of a different light to me. And I don't know if it's fair to necessarily judge the work based on like outside context like that, but for me personally, I feel that like now I'm much more sympathetic to Shinji than I was like 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago. And like last, like I probably watched it maybe like 2003-ish or something last time I watched it. We'll see, because the other thing is I also know what happens. We'll see how I feel by the time we reach end of Evangelion. But that has been my initial impression so far in the kind of the difference between me personally watching it now and me watching it when I originally watched it, or the last time I watched it. So
sure, that makes sense. I would never say that Shinji is like a poorly written character. I would never say my dislike of the character is because of some like technical failing in Evangelion on Evangelion's part. It's just that I personally, here's the thing. I don't to cover my bases here. I don't even need a protagonist who is, a hot-blooded dumbass. That is not even my ideal mecha pilot. Like I like that type of mecha pilot. I love my Ryomas and my Koji Kabutos. But like I would never say like, oh, that is the only kind of mecha pilot I enjoy. I think that, for example, to bring it up again, I think Amuro is a very interesting and compelling character in a lot of ways. So when I say that I think Shinji is a fuckboy and that I don't like him that much, that is purely a personal preference thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and I get. I mean, it's frustrating sometimes when you're watching the show and it's the get in the robot. Like if it's kind of hard. It can be a little frustrating to watch sometimes, but yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to divorce that from the context of I guess what I know
Of
now
course, yeah.
at this point of what Shinji's character is trying to portray and everything. But yeah,
Right.
Iro.
Well, what about
I was
you,
going to
Iro?
ask,
Yeah.
Iro, if it's been a good 10 years since you've seen it, are you feeling any different watching these first 3 episodes than your last time?
I think the subtlety in the character writing really stands out to me now than perhaps it did before, when I was less aware of such things. Like the stuff like I pointed out, how Shinji mentions the knife and then it comes out later, which is, some people might call that basic storytelling, but also it's presented very well.
Yes.
Be surprised
And,
how
like,
hard
stuff-
basic storytelling can be sometimes, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And stuff like his relationship with Misato in episode
Yes,
2
I'm glad you brought that
is
up. Yeah,
very well done, I think. Like, we see how, we start to see like her facade that she keeps up and how that's interacting with Shinji's own problems in not necessarily good ways,
yeah,
but also
totally.
neither of them can really help themselves.
Right. I'm glad you brought up Misato because, there's so much to talk about, that I figure we might just skip it over for the sake of time. But I actually really do like. I really like Misato and Shinji's relationship, not because I think it is a good or healthy relationship, but because it is very interesting to watch those two personalities bounce off each other. Like, you can tell that, you can tell on some level that Misato has, fairly good intentions, or that she is trying her best to make Shinji feel welcome and appreciated, but she's so fucking bad at that job.
Yeah.
It really says a lot that it really says a lot that the best thing that Misato maybe does for Shinji in these 3 episodes is basically tell him that, hey, Shinji, it's at the end of episode 2 where it's like, Shinji, you did a really brave, commendable thing, and it's like,
that scene in particular I find interesting because it's the one time she drops her outward personality to him, but also that's the one thing she'll say that he won't believe for a second.
Yeah, it's there's definitely this aspect of with Misato where it's there's that contrast against Shinji's unfamiliarity and alienation, right? There are all these scenes I feel like where there's a part when Misato brings Shinji to her apartment and he says excuse me, and then she insists, no, this is your home now, you're supposed to say I'm home, right? And you can tell that's Misato trying to be welcoming, but also to a person with Shinji's personality, I think it just comes off as way too overbearing and patronizing, right? But that's how Misato knows how to be friendly, and she can't help that. That's just how she does it.
Yeah, Misato is one of the most interesting characters in the show because she has a lot of facets to her. Yeah, I mean, they even say at some point in the episode, she takes him in out of her arrogance or something, right? Wasn't that one of the lines? I'm trying to remember. Maybe but
was that in these 3 episodes? I mean,
yeah,
she calls Ritsuko to basically say, I have no idea how to deal with this situation, and Ritsuko says, it's your own fault for volunteering.
Right. I mean, you could say it's a type of arrogance, right? Misato is so confident in her ability to quote unquote fix Shinji, right? To make it all good and right.
Yeah, well, I kind of
I can take.
I wouldn't even go
kind
that
of read
far.
it as her trying to find some kind of a validation for her own existence or something. I don't know, taking on a project to make her feel like she's doing something good or something. But
Sure.
And not to say that she doesn't mean well for Shinji or doesn't, have good intentions in that regard, but I think there's more to Misato than meets the eye in these when we first meet her, for sure. So
yeah, just the subtlety of writing where that last scene, we can understand that it is the one time in that episode that Misato's being the most genuine with her statement, while at the same time realizing that it might be the worst thing to say to Shinji.
Right. Yep. That is some good writing to set, because you got to set that up, right, for that to work, and they do a great job setting that up.
I mean, I think it leads me to my other thesis slash conclusion that Shinji would be fine if he was just not surrounded by all these kind of awful, messed up people, and like that is supported by Evidence A, the Super Robot Wars franchise, in which Shinji is a hallmark of that franchise. He is a beloved icon of the Super Robot Wars franchise, specifically because everybody always loves to see how in this Super Robot Wars game, which super robot pilot will take fledgling Shinji under his wing and show him how to give him the life advice
How can we take the characters from Evangelion and make them not the characters from Evangelion?
Oh, whatever.
But what if the real message here is that we're all kind of horrible and terrible? It's the hedgehog's dilemma. We all have our spines and poke at each other, and or yeah, you're right. Maybe he just needs a hot-blooded mecha pilot to take him under his wing. I don't know, but all right. Well, that's probably as good a place as any to cut things off here. I think we went a little longer than I wanted.
A nice short podcast about Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I figured we'd go a little long on this one because there was going to be a lot of intro stuff to get through. We'll probably be a little more breezy in the next couple of episodes, but we had a lot of groundwork to lay and whatnot on this, and I think now that we've kind of got our general opinions out there, we can kind of get into more specific stuff as we move along. But yeah, so I think that'll do it. Let's go ahead and move on to our housekeeping. You can read everything that we write at theglorioblog.com. You can follow us on Twitter at theglorioblog. You can like, comment, subscribe to the podcast feed on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean, and other places. I'm probably missing a few. YouTube, we're on there too. And on the podcast feed, you'll find our other podcasts, of course, the Glorio Chat, where we talk about currently airing anime, or allegedly anyway. We'll see how this season goes.
Well, we'll see how that goes this season.
And Legend of the Glorio Heroes, where G and Iro, you do the pitch, G. What is it, the line?
We discuss and react to the legendary 1988 science fiction
there
OVA.
You go. So we're halfway through on that, so go check that out. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and I think that's about it, except for I think I have one more thing I need to do here, so bear with me 1 second. All right. Next time on Neon Genesis EvanGLORIO, we'll talk about Episode 4, Hedgehog's Dilemma, aka Rain After Running Away, Episode 5, Ray 1, aka Ray Beyond the Heart, Episode 6, Ray 2, aka Decisive Battle in Tokyo 3, and maybe we'll give you a little fan service. See you next time! Oh, I'm gonna have to do that every time now, aren't I?